Zuvuya is a force that propels synchronicity and consequently the supply from which magic bursts forth. It is a reflex of cosmic memory, the circuit through which everything comes back to itself. Through synchronicity, symbols, and metaphors, we are rearranging and forming our inner landscape to be able to grow in the fullness of being our own selves. Welcome to our podcast. In this sacred space, we share valuable knowledge, experiences, and art for the benefit of all. Coming up,
where modern psychology, clinical psychology, stops in the psyche, which is just the personal psyche, quantum physics, and also neuroplasticity, they just cross that border into the transpersonal dimension of the psyche. You know, the archetypal, collective unconscious. So that's very, very interesting indeed.
welcome Synchronauts to our very first episode of the Zuvuya sessions in the 2020s. This is not the first episode officially, but it is. The last one we had was in 2015, and you can listen to it as well here, wherever you are listening to us, be YouTube or any other podcast service. And today I want to introduce to you my special guest, who is Mike Bais. His esoteric training comes from the Western mystery tradition and the Toledano Kabbalah. Living in the Netherlands, in Utrecht, he extensively worked with teachers and groups in the UK. His professional background is working as a physiotherapist, a counselor, a teacher at university, and he also had his own practice for many years. He is a trained priest in the esoteric Christian tradition, which led him to follow the mystical side of this lineage called the ASA. The fascination of the Kabbalah tradition drew him towards the Toledano tradition, and especially the works of Seven Shimon Halevi. From childhood on, the mythology of the Round Table and the Grail were inspirations for a personal journey and quest. After some decades of study and practice in the Western esoteric tradition, the inner work came together in these three streams or disciplines that make up Circle of Avalon. All these streams are lineages that belong to one tradition and are connected through their history, mythology, and metaphysics. Mike sees it as his life work to teach these traditions to whomever wishes to receive them. He is a mystic and teacher by nature, and through his groups, individual sessions, workshops, and writing, transmit them in the most pure and true way he knows. So without further ado, welcome, and I hope that you enjoy this episode. Hello everyone, and welcome to this, not the first, but yes, the first official episode of Zuvuya Sessions podcast. My name is Aida, and I am very happy to have my first official guest from the 2020s, Mike Bais. Thank you so much for joining me. How are you today, Mike?
Very well. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Thank you so much for accepting the invitation, because you're my first guest and you're also my friend and my teacher, so it makes it very special. So thank you so much.
Well, it's my pleasure. Thank you.
So why did I ask you to be here today? Because you just wrote a book and you're going to go to the UK. Is that correct?
Very much indeed. Yes. It's my second book, as a matter of fact, about Kabbalah and science. And yes, I'm going very shortly to the UK to do a few promotions there.
So what we're going to focus on today in today's episode is we're going to talk about this book. It's brand new, just came out of the oven. It's called Kabbalah and Science Part 2. And as you said, you have also a Part 1, and we will have you as a guest again so that you can talk about that book in particular. But for now, I want to tell everybody as well that we're working on a translation to Spanish for these two books, because it's important, I think, because I live in Mexico, and as a person who is blessed to also speak English, I'm very, I have like this luck, you know, I am blessed that I can have access to lots of information in other languages. But some people in Latin America, or people who speak Spanish in other parts of the world, they're looking for this information. that's going to change their lives, because I know it's changing mine. So I'm really happy that you're here with me to talk about these things. And but well, we also want to know, who is Mike Bais? Before we began this exchange, I prepared a little bit of bio so that people who are listening to our podcast know who you are. But I'd like to hear it from you, from yourself. Like, what is your story and your experience? And maybe we can begin this conversation by asking you, how did you first get in touch with Kabbalah? And what is Kabbalah? For those who have no idea what Kabbalah is.
Yes, exactly. Well, first of all, it's quite a long story, so I'm not going to make it that long. But I think for most spiritual seekers, the story begins somewhere in life, probably early. It happened to me in childhood, where there are glimpses of the daily reality that wherein you see that life is not all there is to it, and you see that there are things happening around you that are not of the normal common consciousness, and you're seeking for a kind of confirmation of the fact that life is more than just the natural world and the human world. So that happened to me, and that's why I started in my teenage years to look for other ways. I was brought up a Roman Catholic, that was okay, but I couldn't find it directly in church. So I went on seeking, and gradually, as I am coming from Holland, so Western, Northwestern Europe, I looked into the traditions of this part of the world, first and foremost, and there I found the Kabbalah through some other pathways, so to speak, and first the Hermetic Kabbalah, and later on the Toledano Kabbalah, which is really what my books and my teaching is all about as well. So, and I'm very happy that I've met that particular branch or that lineage of Kabbalah, because it is exactly what I needed to do here in this lifetime, because it's universal, it's open for everyone, so it's integrative, it's inclusive, and yet it's not bound by any culture or religion. And that's the beauty of it, I think. Yeah.
So can you tell us a little bit more about the meaning of the word Kabbalah for those who have no idea what Kabbalah is? Because maybe some people know about it, like, yes, Madonna used to take Kabbalah class or something like that. But I don't know if you can explain a little bit more about it, please.
Exactly. Well, what you will find in most Kabbalah books, whatever the source or lineage is that it will be explained as being coming from a Hebrew word, from the root word kibel, which means to receive. Well, that doesn't say much in the first place, but what does it mean? It means that the Kabbalah tradition is primarily an oral tradition. So it's being transmitted, the teaching, the wisdom of the Kabbalah is transmitted from mouth to ear. And so it can be written down, as I've done in my own books, and that's extremely important. But that's not what the tradition is about in the first place. It's all about the direct transmission from a teacher to the student. So that's one explanation about the word Kabbalah. The second connotation leads to a more mystical implication. And that means that the reception or to receive is through the Kabbalist itself. So as you train as a Kabbalist, there is, so to speak, that vertical connection between yourself and the unseen worlds or the higher worlds. Some call it heaven, and of course also directly to the source. This is very important to mention because Kabbalah is one of the mystical traditions of the world. They say that it is possible for the human being to have a direct connection and relationship to the source of all. So that's the vertical connection. The mouth-to-ear connection is more horizontal from one person to another, and the vertical connection is more vertical. Yeah, from yourself to the source.
Would you say that it's like when we start studying Kabbalah, obviously we're gonna begin by this horizontal connection, as you say, but then it's gonna become like a living knowledge, right? You're gonna start connecting directly to source, or however you want to call the higher realms. Is that, would you say that's your experience?
Oh, very much. And I think every person who is going to seek a tradition or a path, whatever it is, they are allowed to have a glimpse of the higher worlds. So that vertical axis is open for some people who are looking for it, or even people who are not looking for it in the first place, but something opens up anyway, and they have a choice then to go seeking for a tradition if they're ready for it, and otherwise they may abort the mission and just go on with their daily lives. Yeah, but it's not for a select group of people or for any individuals. In potential, we all have that connection to the source. It's just if we invest in that, opening up that channel and keeping it open, that's in general a way of the mystic.
I would add that it's also important that you get the correct guidance as well, because obviously there are many, as you say, many traditions of Kabbalah. And for the modern world, maybe some branches are not going to be enough for some kind of individuals who have different kinds of needs, no? So I think it's important the work that you're doing, because I know you and I've been also collaborating with you before. I know that you're trying to update for these modern times the work of Kabbalah, and I think your book is precisely about it. And so I would like to know, how did you find this correlation between Kabbalah and science, and what inspired you to write these two books?
Yes, thank you. That's a very good remark. Indeed, first of all, it's very important for the seeker, for the Kabbalist, to work with other people or to find a group or other like-minded people. To go completely alone on the path is not always a good thing. And indeed, the second point is about that a tradition goes with the times. So looks at the world and sees the development of the world and a human being within it. And I think Toledano tradition has done, this Kabbalah tradition has done a very good job there, especially the works of Zev ben Shimon Halevi, who has brought the Toledano tradition to the greater public in the 20th and the 21st century. And I am trying to in a sense, expand upon it in my teaching, but also through these books. And it is all possible because this Toledano tradition emphasizes that the metaphysics of old still holds true in relationship to modern times. So, for example, science or medical professions, politics, philosophy, religion, it can all be connected to the tree of life, the diagram of the Kabbalist, and its metaphysical teachings, because it's so universal and timeless. These topics that I've written about in my book, they are also quite modern in a sense. Take, for example, neuroplasticity. These are quite new or newish developments within neurophysiology and in science. So in this book, we are trying to investigate what does it mean, or what can it mean, and what are the implications for the human being in general, but also for the Kabbalist. How can a Kabbalist work in that sense with its own body and the metaphysics of the tree of life?
I have found very, because I'm also studying Kabbalah, like I'm a baby, obviously, like you're a super teacher, and I really appreciate your points of view in the books, but also when we've had our sessions that you are guiding me and teaching me. What I've noticed is that things that seem very abstract, they are explained in Kabbalah, like, and things that maybe didn't make so much sense in terms of quantum physics, for example, as you were saying, or neuroplasticity, you can find a connection on that. And how many years has Kabbalah been around? I don't know if you can tell us a bit about it.
Yeah, in a sense, that's a bit mysterious because some sources say that it it came from the times from Abraham or from Abraham itself. So that's thousands of years even. And some like even to say that the Kabbalah, not in that, not under the same name, but the metaphysical teaching is ageless and comes from the highest teacher, who is named Enoch or Metatron in the Kabbalah tradition. But there are many theories about this. I mean, the name Kabbalah was probably coming into the world around the 12th or 13th century. But the teaching is much older than that.
I think that's what amazes me about Kabbalah, that they're talking about things that you say, oh, it's quantum physics, oh, it's very modern, but not really. This is information that has been there, but it was explained in the mystical, and now we're finding like the scientific language to talk about these things. And to me, that's been mind-blowing, at least. And I'm just beginning my studies, so I think there is much still to discover. No, what do you think about it?
Oh, definitely. And I mean, science does a wonderful job how to find meaning and explanation for natural phenomena, and they do it in their own way. So they investigate a certain part of reality through their own instruments and their own paradigms and hypotheses. But every way of looking at reality, at existence, is limited per definition. So we can see it in its own time frame and its own part of reality that we are investigating. So quantum physics is quite holistic in what it sees. That's why it is vague on the one hand. It's very difficult to understand because it's very paradoxical. As some of the listeners may know, that they speak about that everything is a particle and a wave, and sometimes at the same time they are one and the same thing, which seems impossible for our human intellect and our way of thinking. But Kabbalah says it differently. They say this is possible from the Kabbalistic metaphysical perspective as well. So there are a lot of things that we can parallel there.
Yes, and in a way, our understanding is very limited because we're incarnated on a third dimension officially. No, although people are saying, "Oh, you're also in the fourth and the fifth," but just in terms of practicality, if we are in a third dimension, then it's hard to have a grasp of what other dimensions are like, even though mathematically it's been proven that those things exist. No, so I think that's what's so beautiful about Kabbalah. No.
Very much, and it's a very good point you're making, because talking about instruments of measuring reality is that we have five senses through which we can measure the physical world around us. So these are the physical instruments for physical nature. And we have other psychological instruments to measure other things within our own psyche or around it. But apart from that, there are even more subtler instruments in the human psyche, in our consciousness. And they can only measure, so to speak, or observe those dimensions that belong to the subtler dimensions of the psyche, or even to the spiritual dimensions, or spiritual worlds, as we would call it in Kabbalah. So it's a matter of developing these instruments belonging to each world within the Kabbalistic tradition and in the tree of life.
Yes, I find that knowing these different topics within Kabbalah helps you get an approximation to what reality is like without really going so crazy about it, because it's really hard to understand. Like in the time that I've been working with you, for example, I've told you, like, I don't have words to explain what this is about. It's very mystical. And so we need to be training and to be reading and to be educating ourselves about so many things to start grasping a little bit of what reality is. At least that's has been my experience. I don't know if it has been like that for you as well.
Yes, very much. And in Kabbalah, we would encourage the beginner Kabbalist to really, excuse me, to start discovering oneself and the world close to home. So where you are in yourself and where you're familiar with, start to explore the world there. So start to use the five senses that you have, so seeing, hearing, etc., in a different way, that you start to discover what you're truly seeing, because most of the time we are not using our senses consciously. And that's one of the first wonderful practices that we can do. Is just go about your business and your day, and at the same time use those instruments consciously. Yeah, and
Yes,
anybody
like
can do it. Yeah, yeah,
be more mindful of what you're doing in your here and now. No.
very much.
And that's
Yes.
something that I've been working with for many years, studying and teaching about the law of time and the Tolkien, that we are so used to thinking about the future or the past that we're not really paying attention to our present moment or our bodies or what is really going on with us. We're always thinking about the outside. So it's interesting because Kabbalah will help you or force you in a way. Some people are not ready, as you say. They will begin their path and they say, you know what, this is not for me, because it's going to force you to look at yourself and to do the inner work. And once you pass that threshold, it's like you can't go back to what how you were unconscious. That has been my experience as well. I don't know, how about you or your students even? What have you noticed in them when they start, when they really stay on the path of Kabbalah?
Mm. Yes, exactly. If you have gone on a certain path like Kabbalah, and you have received knowledge, it's very difficult to go back to where you came from. And for most people, it doesn't happen. So I've seen students in my groups who stay for about 10 years or longer. And most of the people, they work to receive knowledge about themselves, so self-knowledge, to improve their lives, to may become more knowledgeable about what the transcendent is, or what God is in life. But people come with their own motivations. And some of them may be even devotive to the tradition and say, okay, now I'm trying to give back something, like I'm teaching, I'm writing, or whatever it is. But it doesn't need to be through teaching or writing, because every person can return the given wisdom through by means of its own life. So indeed, it is true that most people, they stay on the path somehow, within their own mode of doing it and integrating it in their own lives. And that's the typical Western way of every person is an individual, and every Kabbalist has its own life, and that is the so-called workshop that we are in all the time. So that's the application of the knowledge of Kabbalah, is to apply it in everyday life.
That's something I really appreciate from your teachings. And coming back to your book, because you have some meditations on the book, like you have the theory, but you also have practice that one can do on their own. Because sometimes,
Yeah.
like, I'm so blessed and I'm so really grateful that we can do this connection. Like, I live in Mexico, you're in the Netherlands, and thanks to the internet, we can connect. But there's a lot of people who are looking for these kinds of teachings and they don't have that opportunity. But if they get your book, they will have also that opportunity to say, okay, maybe I'm not in a group or I don't have a direct guide, but here I have an opportunity to do some meditations or do some breath work that is related to the connection of how my body is working, how my psyche is working in terms of this Kabbalistic view. So I think that is brilliant, and that's a great idea that you integrated that in your book. And coming back to your book and your inspiration, could you tell us a little bit more about your teacher, Halevi? What was the impact he has had in your life and your teachings? Because maybe people don't know about him, who he is, and it's important to talk about his legacy, I think.
Oh yeah, very much. Yeah, it's a personal story in a sense, because he could have been a teacher of Kabbalah to me, and that's it. But it really became a kind of a friendship or a father-son relationship, you could say. And yeah, that was from the first minute that I met him back in the late 90s. There was a good connection there, like a recognition, maybe from past lives, who will say. But anyway, we recognized each other, and and I knew I was home within that tradition because I was looking for Kabbalah, but didn't find it within the Hermetic traditions completely. This system that Halevi brought me is complete and whole. I haven't found anything like this before. It's exactly what I was looking for. And I think Halevi himself recognized that as well. And he always encouraged me to teach and to write and yeah, to build up this tradition and to extend upon it and to follow in his footsteps. Not that he asked me to do it, but I naturally felt the need to do so. So in short, yes, it was a tremendous effect it had on my life, and it still has, because in these kind of traditions, teachers are never completely gone. They become like an inner lineage and connection to you. Um, and yeah, so that's the story about it. And so the teaching is still alive, and through the teaching, uh, he is still with me in that sense.
Wow, that is so like I didn't know some of the things that you're just telling me. It's nice to know that you also have that special connection. And people who know me know I love Star Wars. So for me, this is like you are still Force Ghost being taught by your teacher from the other side, no? So I think that is so cool that if you connect to Kabbalah, you have that possibility of still, and maybe it happens not only with Halevi, but maybe other teachers that are not incarnate, and you can connect to them through these practices, no? Is that possible?
Oh, very much. I mean, most traditions, even if you look at Buddhism, uh, but also Kabbalah, they talk about the inner contacts or the fathers and mothers of the tradition. So those who went before us, they have built up this tradition, and they are still there. Some people even experience that the past teachers are more present, discarnate, than when they were still alive. They get certain very specific positions in the schools that have been formed, and the traditions. So definitely they are there, and if you're sensitive to it and open and listen very well, because that's a Kabbalah is to listen very carefully, and not just with the ears, but to listen with your whole being to what the subtler worlds are telling us.
I think that is beautiful because we want to always think things through, and we really need to use all of our senses to connect to the divine and to the magic of everyday life. So in a way, I think it makes a lot of sense. And I mean, Kabbalah, you can talk about so many things within Kabbalah. Why did you choose to focus on the connection between Kabbalah and science in particular for these books?
Well, because just simply out of interest. I'm coming from the medical, paramedical world, so in it there is science, of course. And I was fascinated by quantum physics, although that is completely not my expertise. Uh, Nevertheless, I saw immediately, also with some very good friends of mine, also Kabbalists, that there were these remarkable parallels within the uh, science of quantum physics and the metaphysics of the tree of life. And I just couldn't resist writing about it and finding these connections, and to share it with other people. First through courses, and I think the most important thing in this sense to mention is that in 2015 there was a book written with different articles about Kabbalah, and it was given to Halevi because his first international teachings were in Holland back in the 70s. And he started to stop doing these overseas teachings because he was older and he thought this is enough. So he stopped doing that, and his last weekend in Holland, this book was given to him with these articles. And my article was about Kabbalah and Science. And that was the beginning, so to speak, of a book, that article. And Halevi said to me, Mike, he said, these forms of sciences are the new psychology. And I thought that is very important, because this may be interesting for the listener on this program, is that where modern psychology, clinical psychology, stops in the psyche, which is just the personal psyche, quantum physics and also neuroplasticity, they just cross that border into the transpersonal dimension of the psyche, the archetypal collective unconscious. So that's very, very interesting indeed.
I hadn't thought about it, but it's true, because a lot of people that I know, at least here in Mexico, we're doing deep work into healing our ancestral lines. Like, there are many wounds in our family, in our family trees, and normal psychology can only get you so far, no? But if you start working with Kabbalah or these aspects of science, as you say, and there are authors, and I know I'm obsessed with Joe Dispenza, and I talk about him all the time, but he's kind of doing that work as well, like showing people how you can reprogram your mind. And you can, on the one side, do an epigenetic change, like you can direct how your body can start activating or deactivating certain things. And it doesn't matter if your family, you have, I don't know, cancer or diabetes or whatever, you can stop it where you are. Or if there's trauma in your family because somebody was murdered or raped, or there were suicides or whatever, then you get the opportunity to reprogram that. And normal psychology doesn't do that for you. So we definitely need other tools. So for example, there's Bruce Lipton talking about this, Joe Dispenza is talking about this, but nobody's talking, like, they're the scientific part, no, which I think is brilliant, because not everybody's ready to connect to the mystical or to connect to a spiritual thing, because again, talking about the wounds we all have, some people have very deep wounds from religion, no, depending on which religion they were growing up with and what they know, there might be wounds there as well. And you say, no, I don't want to know anything about religion because I've been hurt by it, no? So I hadn't thought about it, but it makes a lot of sense. Kabbalah can help you direct those changes as well in your psyche and also in your body, no? And that's kind of what you're talking about in the book. Is that correct?
Very much, yes. What I also emphasize is not to discourage anyone, but that there are conditions in our natural human nature, and some of those conditionings are psychological, some of them are physical. But indeed, like you said, it's possible to change those conditionings. But to do that, you have to, as a Kabbalist, function on a level higher than where you want to make those changes in the natural body and in the psyche. So there you have quite a challenge as a Kabbalist, because you need to grow in a certain consciousness where you are able to choose and not be prone or a victim to our biopsychological conditionings. So there are really things, it's a real work we have to do, and it may take a lifetime. So it's not that we can just change things by thinking about it. This is a matter of pure consciousness and will, and the power of the imagination to use. So it's a lifelong work to really undergo that transformative process that we are talking about here. But it's possible, definitely. The potential is there.
Yes, I was very surprised when I read, like, it made so much sense to me, because of things that I've lived and my family and like my own experience, that you say that we in our bodies, we also we have this memory within our bodies. So when trauma happens, even if it's not you, it could be your mother or your grandmother or I don't know, that also is within your cells, but also your own grief, your own pain, it's there embedded in your body, and you have to let it move, and people may not be aware of this. And to me it was like, wow, that made so much sense and made me realize the importance of doing the psychological and emotional work, letting go of this condition, like realizing, okay, is this a conditioning that has hurt me, or is this a program, let's call it that way, is this a program that can help me feel better or be a better person? And then you have to choose which programs you're going to keep and which ones you need to recycle or change. And that involves a process that is painful. The body gets uncomfortable, even you might even get sick. Like this is part of also the cleaning, no? And uh also something that surprised me, just a couple of days ago, there's this podcast on Facebook called the Red Table Talk, and they were talking about how we can have freezing, like it's frozen grief. Like we don't deal with our grief when things are happening to us, we just let it there. And if you don't like do some work to thaw it and to let it go, then you're going to keep it in your body, and that could also even develop into diseases, no, kind of like cancer or diabetes, whatever, no. So for me that wasn't one of, because the book is amazing, I really loved it. It's one of the golden nuggets in your book, in the second part of this exploration you're doing between Kabbalah and science. The nugget is also you have to tend to your body, because in the spiritual work, no, they say no, you have to leave, the body's not important, it's only the spiritual part. And here you're telling us no, you have to tend to the body as well. So I found that very interesting. How did you come to this information? Was it through Kabbalah, your own work? Did you do this correlation reading other texts, your experience?
Yes, well, first of all, Kabbalah is very affirmative mystical tradition. It means that it's affirmative to life. That means that the physical world and also your physical body that was given to you is, because it came from the higher worlds, is a spiritual tool. It's not just an animal body that we have been given at birth, but we can regard it as a spiritual tool, spiritual biological vessel, so to speak. And so we can discover in it the wisdom that has been, as it were, yeah, just created and manifested or materialized in it. So the body is not just a physical machine, but is an amalgam of wisdom, so to speak. So how do we really come to know the wisdom that is stored in it? And in that sense, the body is a very intelligent machine at the one hand, and at the same time, it is it's always in the now. So if you seek that momentum of eternity, the body is always here. The psyche is not. The psyche goes backwards and forwards and goes in all kinds of directions. So that's why in meditation, breathing is so important, because the breath is in the body. So if you go to your breath with your attention and your consciousness, you come inside to the body, and the body is nowhere else than in the now. Another thing about the body is that it is a very good servant, because anything that we do within our psyche, our emotional life, our feelings, it will in the end manifest within the body. So if we give it a certain assignment, so to speak, we give it a certain thing to do, unconsciously or consciously, it will perform it. So if we are very happy, we will eventually get a very happy body. I mean, physically, through certain hormones and enzymes and peptides. And the same happens when we are miserable. That's what happens. So we are in potential the directors of how our body is not only behaving, but what its constitution is.
Yeah, I think it's brilliant what you're saying. Like, you have to be mindful of your thoughts and your emotions, because that's gonna set like the tone or the pace of how your body is going to be releasing all of these chemicals, and it's gonna have an impact on how you're feeling, also in your body. So it's realizing that it like you have to be mindful of your thoughts and your feelings. No, it's a big responsibility, and we're not aware of it.
Very much. And another way of working with this is with that diagram, that beautiful diagram of the Kabbalist, the tree of life, because it is a mirror image of the body, of the psyche as well, but also of the body. So if we see ourselves within that image, which is a very symmetrical, harmonious diagram, and we regard it as something which is a mirror image of our body, we will gradually, systematically over time, we will see our body in a symmetrical, harmonious way. So we give a certain implication, we give it a certain idea, the body is how to function. And that's very different working in that way than through the ordinary psyche, who cannot do this job. It cannot regulate the body in that sense. But archetypal symbols can, like the tree of life. I hope that's clear for the listener.
Yeah, like I love about the book that you have also tons of graphics, so that we can understand what you're talking about. But it is true that it's like the same archetype or archetypal energy, and then you can just fractally put it in different parts, and it always makes sense. That's what I love about the tree of life. But if you have never heard about Jacob's ladder or these stories, then it doesn't make much sense at the beginning. But in your book, I think that the way you are bringing those two things together, both the graphics and the original Kabbalistic information that you've been working with for so many years, and then your own input from your scientific point of view, to me, it's like a really good companion if you're starting to do this kind of work. And obviously, your books are not for like exactly beginners, but as a beginner, you can have more or less an idea of what's going on. And I would just advise that if you're gonna buy this book and you're like a beginner, just make sure that you have somebody guiding you to understand it in depth. But anyways, like for me, it was so, because as I already said, I am really a beginner in my studies in Kabbalah. I've been studying like a couple of years, really, so I'm very, very new. And what I've noticed is that reading the book, some things like stuck in my subconscious mind, and then I would see the same information in other texts, because I've been reading Halevi because of your guidance, and I think he's brilliant, or other books, or listening to other Kabbalists. And then I'm like, okay, so this is what this means. So your teachings and your books have helped me like really bring it together in part, in the, like the practical part in my everyday life, which I think is something that is very valuable, to move from theory into practice. And speaking of this, I would like to know, how have you integrated this knowledge into your everyday life, and how has it been useful and practical for you?
Well, that is just an ongoing thing. In the Kabbalah tradition, we speak of a student of Kabbalah and a Kabbalist. So we all start with being a student of Kabbalah, and you just look at the theory, like you just said, you try to apply it in daily life, and gradually you start to build it up. And sometimes it becomes a weekly practice, or for some a daily practice. And for some it becomes a natural ongoing process, and then you become a Kabbalist. You are not a part-time Kabbalist, but you are a full-time one. And that means that almost every situation in life has a certain reference to your inner state, your tree of life. And so it can be family, can be work, it can be the teaching, of course, it can be writing. And but basically there's not a day, at least not a day, or sometimes a moment that passes by that the Kabbalah is not there. So, and these can be challenging moments sometimes for you, and they can be very peaceful moments as well. The difference probably is that the Kabbalist looks at all the different changes in life, whether they're good or bad, sees them as providence. So this is how I look at life as well. So they are given to us, not for reward or punishment, but to look at it because it has been given to us to eventually become whole, to become unified again. So when something happens in my life and I may be irritated or angry or whatever it is, I say, okay, Mike, what does this have to tell me? And how can it bring me closer to unity? And that's an important, almost I would say, vital question for the Kabbalist. How does it bring me closer to the light? That is a question that I've used for years and years now. And there will always be an answer to that question. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm sorry, speaking about it, like, what would you tell people who are interested in learning Kabbalah? Like, maybe people are like, listening to us right now, like, this sounds interesting. I might benefit from that. So, what would you tell them, and what can they expect from applying Kabbalah in their everyday life?
Yes. Well, first of all, anyone who starts to follow a serious tradition should always be prepared to invest in it and to see it also in the long term. It could be Buddhism or Zen, can be Kabbalah in this case, but you really have to be committed to it and say, okay, it may be tough in the beginning. We have to learn a whole new language, like you have to see some Hebrew words here and there, and the theory may be a bit awkward. So that's the first challenge probably for everyone, is to get through. But if you persist as a beginning student, then there will also be fruits on your tree of life, and you will know that things will be returning to you. So you will be giving rewards for studying, so to speak. So that's very important. And to, as the tree of life diagram describes it in the beginning, is to keep looking very carefully to your tree of life, to the diagram in relation to yourself, and just see the simple principles that it reflects upon you. And that's one of the most important things, and to make it very practical.
Yes, I think that that's very important. I remember when you were telling me, like, you will know them by their fruits. Like, how are you taking care of your own tree? And at the beginning, when we talked about it last year, it didn't make much sense to me. But now that I'm advancing in the studies, I'm like, now I understand, because there is a very practical side of Kabbalah. And as you say, in my experience, or the people that I know that are studying or applying Kabbalah, you can either use it as for your well-being or to bring yourself some health, stability. For me, it brings me peace. And I think that's a jewel that's hard to find in this modern world. So because Kabbalah is inviting you to just like be in the present moment, as you say, and if you answer that call, that invitation, then you will find peace. It doesn't matter what's going on outside you, like doesn't matter what's going on around. You're centered, no, in the middle pillar, as you have taught me, and then it's like, okay, then you can navigate whatever comes, no, like for me that has been my experience with Kabbalah. But it takes effort and dedication, definitely. It's not just like, I'm going to be meditating and I will be illuminated. No, you have to study, you have to practice, you have to do a lot of reading. So definitely it as you say, yes, I have to say that's true. You have to dedicate time and effort for that, but what you receive in exchange, it's like it's very much worth it, I think. So
Definitely, yeah. In the older texts within Kabbalah, you have old books like they're called the Zohar, for example. They are more poetic, a bit difficult to read, but I'm just mentioning it because it's being said that that the higher worlds, as they are called in Kabbalah, or the divine, it expresses itself without any reserve. So without holding back, it gives itself to creation consistently and without any pause. So even now at this very moment in the interview, the divine is pouring out in the world, and we are here as the recipient, and you are able to receive that. And the more you give back in return to what you have received, this is the idea, the more you will be given again. And that can give a tremendous experience of peace and meaning, that alone. And again, there we have that meaning about the Kabbalist as being a receiver. That's where we start with the word kibel, of reception and listening. So be open continuously. There's a beautiful person called the Baal Shem Tov. He's from the another Kabbalah tradition, and he used to say, just wake up in the morning and imagine that this is the new day of creation. This is your first birth again, and start wondering again. And that's really a very Kabbalistic way of approaching life. Don't pretend that you know everything, or maybe even don't pretend to know anything at all, and just open to the wonder that is unfolding every moment.
Like a child.
Exactly. Yeah. In the
Yes.
innocence of a child. Yeah.
Yes, that's a great piece of advice. Just like, because then you are also given the opportunity to leave behind anything that might be burdening you, that is even not a part of your own history, but you're carrying that. But you say no, you can renew. It doesn't matter what you have done in life, your mistakes doesn't matter. You can also like change your story in the here and now. So I think that's something to be very mindful about, and give ourselves the opportunity to change. It doesn't matter what has happened before. What matters is what are you going to do starting right now.
Exactly.
And it's nice
And
that Kabbalah does that also for us. Mm-hmm.
Very much. And also there's a parallel to quantum physics, where it is said that in potential, every moment is a wave and nothing has happened yet. But there is a possibility or a probability for a certain potential to become actualized. So it becomes a particle, they say, or it becomes a thought, or it becomes an action. But every moment, also now, is a potential moment, a wave for a new beginning, a new idea, a new thought, a new manifestation, so to speak. And the human being is within that consciousness and has the potential in a certain mode of consciousness to make that actualization happen. Because our mode of living normally is conditioned, and then that change or actualization doesn't happen. It's just a repetition of the same actualization that we know. Yes. But again, through a certain mode of consciousness, in Kabbalah we call that Tiferet, which is a key point, the heart chakra, so to speak, we can make that change. We can make that actualization happen. Yeah.
Just break the loops, get out of the dream spell, break the dream spell, and then just connect to the true nature. And yes, obviously the heart is the center that's going to help us do that.
Exactly.
And we
Halevi would call this the great passing show. That's the relative unfoldment, but within it, still the creative act can be participated by the Kabbalist.
So long as we give space to it as well, because if we don't give it space, then it's not going to reach us.
Very much.
Wow, Mike, this is so interesting, getting to know a little bit more about your views, and obviously many of these things you're talking about in your book. So what are your plans for the near future? Do you have more books coming along, workshops, and how can people contact you?
Yes, thank you. Well, first of all, a very one of the recent initiatives is in a few weeks' time, I'll be going to the UK on the 10th of June already, going to do a book presentation of part 2 of this book in the Library of Avalon in Glastonbury. And 2 days later, I'm going to give another workshop. But that is a different topic, but it's about the round table philosophy, so to speak. It's also very Kabbalistic. Apart from that, I will be giving in August in the UK. That's in Stroud in the Cotswold. It's called Hawkwood College. And there I'm going to give a 2-day workshop, quite intense workshop about Kabbalah and the round table. Very practical. So we're going to talk about the metaphysics of Kabbalah, but also in relation how the round table really works and the whole myth of King Arthur and the quest for the Grail. It's a beautiful metaphor. By the way, something that I've talked about with Halevi much in the past, and he was always fascinated by the same myth as I was. So that's a beautiful thing. And probably after the summer, I'll start writing or working on the next manuscript, which is already in progress, which is about Kabbalah and the quest for the Grail. So that's basically a lot of things that are going on at the moment. Yes.
So do you have your book there with you that you could show it to us? Or you didn't have it around? I just want to let people know.
I can pick it up. It's just behind me. I can.
Okay, so while you do that, just let everybody know that Mike has this book available in different digital platforms, and also you can order it online. Where can we order your book? There it is.
Oh, digitally everywhere, I could say, because I'm my own publisher. So this is published by Circle of Avalon Books. This is part 2, so this is the most recent version of it, and this is the first one of 2019, part 1. Yeah, it can be ordered through Amazon or Barnes and Nobles, and any bigger or smaller selling point everywhere on the planet, so to speak. If you look at it on the internet, you will find it, definitely. And otherwise, you can contact me directly. If you have a look on my website, Circle of Avalon .nl from the Netherlands, then just contact me and I can also send it to you, definitely.
Okay. And do you have Instagram, Facebook? How can people reach you on social media?
Yes, the most that I use is Facebook. I have my own page called Mike Bais, and related to that is another page which is called Circle of Avalon again. So that's easy enough, I suppose. So if you come in contact, then just let me know what you're looking for, and if it's the school or it's interesting Kabbalah, it doesn't need to be the book directly or primarily. It's always good. And Instagram as well, it's under the same name. You can find me there. Yeah.
Well, I love everything that you post on Facebook, and that's how I found you, because you posted in a group. I can't remember which group, and that's how I found you. I was like, oh, this is interesting, because you're talking about the Grail and the Arthuriad, but also Kabbalah. I was like, this is interesting. There is a connection. And so I'm really looking forward to your next book. And for example, your first book, the Kabbalah and Science Part 1, I got it, like I live in Mexico, so I got it from Amazon. So you can be sure that wherever you live, you can get the books. And Mike here, he's super, super nice, and you can just send him a message and he will be glad to answer to your questions, and you can ask directly the book if you want it on digital, so directly with you. Is that correct? Yes.
Very much, very much.
And if there's people that live in the Netherlands and would like to take a class with you, they can also contact you, right?
Yes, definitely. Yeah. Where I live here in my own home, I have 2 different groups, Kabbalah groups, and some other activities like Roundtable. But primarily for Kabbalists or people who are interested in it, they're definitely welcome. So they can contact me again through the same website, circleofavalon.nl. Yes.
And hopefully soon you will become international also, and then you will give us some classes to your different contacts abroad, because what you are teaching is really brilliant. So thank you so much, Mike, for giving me this interview, for being my guest. And I'm really looking forward to having you back on, because there's so much to talk about everything that you are working on, and people need to get to know this information. So I want to thank you so much for being my guest.
Well, and thank you so much for giving this opportunity, not only to me personally, but also to the tradition, because these are times that doors have to be opened for people who are looking for it. And this is one of the doors that you are opening. So that's really great. So keep doing this.
Yes, thank you. So this is the beginning of an adventure, and I'm glad that you are helping me open this gate here at the
Certainly.
Zuvuya Sessions podcast. Thank you, Synchronauts, for listening to us. And we'll hear from Mike very soon for sure. So if you're going to be in the UK, follow him and go check out what he has to say, because it's super interesting. And also check his website and all of his social media. So see you soon, Synchronauts. Thank you so much, Mike. Have a lovely day.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.